so much for coming out in New England weather and the unpredictability of all of it. It means so much to me to have you guys here right now. Thank you, my hat. I'm not going to wear it during the... I don't have that many opportunities to wear like my traditional like Peruvian clothing. So welcome in. So if you had a chance to look around and you have questions, we'll do a question and answer at the end. If you haven't, hopefully this presentation still makes sense to you. So I'm a local artist. I live in Framingham. I run a yoga studio out there. I see a bunch of yoga students out here. Woo. You guys are usually hearing me talk about like yoga stuff, so I'm excited to share like my own culture with you. So when I was a child, I was raised on stories from the Bible. Like Jesus and Moses filled my dreams at night. Obsessed, like every day. The Bible, obsessed. In elementary school, I learned about and devoured stories about ancient Egypt, their gods, Anubis and Thoth. In high school, we read Beowulf and the Iliad, and I dove into Norse, Greek, and Roman mythology head first, annoyingly. In college, it's about 5 years into my yoga journey, I was welcomed warmly into the temples of the Hare Krishnas, the Buddhists, the Hindus, all of them sharing their epic stories of Rama and Sita. My college art was filled with stories from the Ramayana, from the Bhagavad Gita, stories from my friends from China. Like truly a lot of devotional paintings to Ganesh happened in that period of my life. And all the while I felt so jealous, so lacking. Like, why don't I come from a culture that has gods and goddesses and dragons? Everyone else gets them. I'm Dominican, descending from the Taino and Arawak people, along with plenty of other kids in New York, where I grew up. Yet the Dominican Republic is only ever mentioned in schools to mention that it is where Christopher Columbus landed. If that. Usually the specifics are even left out of that. The Caribbean is mentioned then twice more in New York public school, the Haitian Revolution and the Cuban Missile Crisis. I'm also Peruvian, as you might have caught the drift from the food and the artwork. And that part of me comes from the Quechua and Aymara people. And they descend from the Inca Empire. They predate them, but we'll get there. The largest empire in the world at its peak during the 1500s, contested only in size by the Ming Dynasty in China at the time. However, it was mentioned perhaps in a sentence of our New York public schools. If that, lumped into a paragraph along with the mighty Aztecs and the mysterious Maya. Lucky if there was a paragraph at all, often a mere footnote, and those of you who know me know that I read all of the footnotes and the appendices. I was just like in this search for anything that would prove or even hint to the existence of my ancestors. That my bloodline story begins before my family immigrated to America, or the United States, let me correct that. It wasn't until years after college, chasing sunshine and the prophetic cross-country road trip, having moved to California on the border of Mexico, that I made friends with the true natives, and they had stories of the Aztecs and their gods, very much still alive on their tongues, in their graffiti, and behind their eyes, that I started searching for my own gods. And it turns out we have so many stories of epic battles, of love, of loss, of cosmic friendship, but little to no pictures. I mean, really, I've spent years scouring every single title in the Minuteman Library Network that has anything to do with South America. I have checked out. And there's little to no pictures. And so I started building my own library at home. A collection of facsimiles, encyclopedias, research papers, post-it noting and highlighting amazing tales and characters that deserve to be seen, not lost in the heavy academic text and footnotes. Thousands of artifacts have miraculously survived the scourge of the Spaniards who invaded South America, making a point to intentionally destroy pottery, textiles, building, jewelry, mummies, anything that would reference a past before Christianity. I've used what's left, and truly it is beautiful, what we do have as reference for the works that I'm sharing with you today. My research is a mix of spoken word stories passed along in conversations, trips to Peru with like my uncles, my cousins, what the tour guides told me during those museum visits, as well as books written by white anthropologists, funded by museums, papers written by Europeans, as well as South American academics, National Geographic articles, translated copies of the Huarichi manuscript, and Felipe Goma de Ayala's writing from the year 1616, which was an integral piece of literature in an effort to have the Spaniards treat the natives less brutally and to humanize them. Of course, here I was, an illustrator with no work, a waitress really, some would say, with illustration skills gathering dust. And here before me, this monumental task of illustrating these stories in a way to make them more known and accessible to others. I thought, this will be a cool way to teach my Black, white, and Asian friends about my gods and history. So I got to work on this coloring book project, 6 years ago, and filled it with fun facts about the Andes. If you colored any of those coloring pages back there, those are pages from the coloring book project. And within hours of posting, it sold out, the first printing, and then the second printing, and then the third. And that told me, okay, there's something here, like people are interested in this. And so I'm like, all right, let me start on a bigger project. And that's where the tarot card project came in. So tarot, if you're familiar with it, has 78 cards to it, and each of them has stories and symbolism behind them. And I thought, okay, if I could like James Campbell this out and like find where the South American stories and folks like fit into these Carl Jungian archetypes, then this will be a good way to aim my research. Of course, I started immediately posting on social media as the project progressed. And what surprised me was most of the messages I received reacting to my work was not from my friends or strangers on the internet who were European descendants or Asian or Black. They were actually from other kids like me who had grown up in the United States, some British following too, or England, whose parents had immigrated, or grandparents had immigrated from South America. And they had never heard anything about South America, where they came from before the Europeans came. And so people who were only one generation removed from the motherland, they felt completely disconnected and ignorant about their own history and spiritual ties to something deeper than the violently enforced doctrine. We don't maybe see that now, but that's how we got here. So that was really encouraging. It was like, wow, all these other like first generation Peruvian, Ecuadorian, Bolivian kids are reaching out to me. The kids are like in their 20s, right? And being like, this is the first time I've ever heard of the sun god. This is only the first time I've ever heard of any of this. So that was like my motivation, my fuel to keep going when I was like in the weeds about this research. So let's start at the beginning. Imagine darkness, and the god Viracocha gets bored, as they do, and decides to create humans. So he creates humanity from the primordial waters of Lake Titicaca, which is a real place, and sets them forth on the land. And in this darkness, And in this darkness, what do humans do? They start killing each other. And doing like all the bad things, lying, stealing, cheating, the works. And he's like, ooh, I made a terrible mistake. So he shuts them down and turns them into the rocks and mountains that we know today. He's like, ooh, version 1.0, not so good. These people need guidance. And so from the waters of the lake, he pulls out the sun and the moon so that the sun can guide people by day and the moon can guide people by night. And then creates us, version 2.0, humanity. So we have the sun god, Inti, and the moon goddess, Mamakia, and they rule equally. So imagine a night that is as bright as the daylight, but with cool silver moonlight. So equal people worshipped Inti as equal number as worshipped Mamakia, but Inti did not love that. He's a jealous god. And so he grew in size and scorched the surface of Mamakia's face. And that's why the moon doesn't shine as bright as the sun. And that's why the moon has ashen scars on her face. So, that sucks. But don't worry, because Mamakia has a friend in Koyur, the star goddess. And the star goddess and Mamakia hang out in the nighttime sky all day, and they decide to get back at Inti. And she decides, or Mamakia decides, I'm going to show up in the daytime sky, something that the sun can never do in the nighttime sky. And that's why we see the moon during the day afterwards. So Koyur has a brother, and his name is Iyapa, and he's our storm god. And he's in charge of when it rains and when it droughts. So, so if you want the storm god, any god, to do your bidding, you have to make sacrifices, so you have to pray to them, right? But Iyapa is very temperamental. Like New England weather, like imagine living on a mountainside where like if it doesn't rain, like all your people starve. But Iyapa loves black dogs. So do I. This is my child. This is Lucy. Aww. Loves black dogs. So what did the Inca do? They tied up black dogs in front of his temple with empty water bowls. And they told Iyapa, hey, if you don't want this dog to die of thirst, you'll make it rain. And that's how you pray to Iyapa. So, rain is important for crops. You don't only pray to Iyapa for rain. Crops take more than just rain. So, in come the conopas. So the conopas are our goddesses of crops. So we have Axo Mama, the goddess of potatoes, Sara Mama, the goddess of corn, Quinoa Mama, the goddess of Coca Mama, the goddess of, well, you get the idea. And I'm kind of getting ahead of myself here, so let's just. So how did the Incas start? Inti, the sun god, sends Manco Capac and his wife, Mama Okyo. She's also the goddess of fertility, weaving, all that good stuff. She teaches humans actually how to clothe themselves properly. And gives him a golden staff and says, where this staff sinks easily into the ground, a rainbow will appear, and this is where you will start the city of Cusco, land of the Inca. And so you can imagine, like, okay, that's cool. But like, if you're walking around a mountain and you're gonna grow crops on it, you're gonna want soil that's soft enough to sink a staff into. That means it's fertile land. Okay. So, that's okay. We can use our imagination / if you saw the paintings, it's great. All right. So the Inca, they set up shop in this valley, in this Cusco valley. But there's already people there, and they're called the Chancla. And the Chancla are not super stoked about this new tribe that's moved in. So they're constantly like bickering. The Inca are not an empire yet, mind you. They're just a tribe that's moved in. And so the Chancla put an army together and they decide to like take over Cusco. So they're coming over to Cusco with like lots of troops, all of that. And the Sapa Inca, who's the king of the Inca, he's like, we gotta get out of Dodge. We don't have the numbers, we don't have the army, we don't stand a chance. So they're like, we're gonna leave, we're gonna evacuate the city. But one of his generals, Tupac Inca Yupanqui, stays behind. He goes, no, I'm gonna stay. Like imagine like that movie 300 with the Spartans. He's like, we're gonna stay, we're gonna fight till the last one, so that at least we die with honor. He stays behind, the rest of the city evacuates. And they see the Chancla army coming up the mountain. And Tupac Yupanqui, he goes to Inti, the sun god, and says like be what may, I dedicate this battle to you. And then the story goes that the rocks themselves animated themselves and crushed the Chancla army, completely destroying them. So, was he an incredible devotee to Inti who got these rocks to come to life? Or was he a very intelligent army general with a creative streak when the story got told to the citizens who had evacuated, where he tumbled the rocks down onto the army? We don't know. We just don't know. All right. So the rest of my slides aren't working. That's okay. I will tell you guys, we do have dragons. They are the rainbow. The reason that you don't see the ends of the rainbow is because rainbows are tulamanya. Tulamanya is a double-headed sky serpent. So the ends of the rainbow are faces of a dragon. And there is a painting out there on the walls of tulamanya out there. But there's a whole race of dragons, actually. And lots of sky battles for that. So. Okay. So there's lots of stories. I could go on and on. I have a story for every painting, actually. If you like follow me on Instagram, you've seen it. And if you don't, you can ask me. Let me just say this. Specifically to the Latinos in this room. Sangre de mi sangre. Yeah? We have a deep-rooted culture. We have thousands of years of history that are specifically not marketed to us, told to us. They're hidden behind paywalls of academic websites. They're hidden behind degrees that cost tens of thousands of dollars. But it's out there. It's out there, and it's totally ours to claim. It's not opinion. It's not an accident that we are sidelined in our public school textbooks. It's not an accident that we were demoted from a race to an ethnicity on the census. It's not. Latinos made up an eighth of George Washington's army. An eighth. How many wars do you think would be won if an eighth of the standing army just didn't show up? This country wouldn't exist without us. 10,000 Latinos in the Civil War, 200,000 in World War I, 500,000 in World War II. Latinos have made up a large percentage of every single war fought in this country. But it's not just that. Who grew your food during the pandemic when global supply chains shut down? It wasn't our sons and daughters. All right, all right. %83 of farm workers in this country are Latino. More than half are undocumented. If we're going to, all right, let me just reel it in. It's very easy to say, you paint pretty pictures, Samuel, like, why can't you just not get political? Come on. But there's no unpolitical art, truly, truly. Think of something that you're like, oh, that's totally unpolitical. A portrait painting. Okay, all right, a portrait painting. Is it not a reflection of beauty standards, societal standards of the time? A landscape. Is it not actually a ploy to get you to connect with the natural world, to preserve our natural spaces? And so even when you're looking at like an adorable little teddy bear drawn by a little kid, that's political. Choosing joy in times of strife is not unpolitical. And neither is painting gods and goddesses who haven't been spoken about in hundreds of years. And it's not meant to be. It's not meant to be. So, yes. We can just open this up actually to, if anybody has any questions, maybe I have the answers, but about something that I said, some painting that you saw, the process, the research, we can open it up. We got a whopping 5 minutes. You guys who are in my yoga class know, I'm like, everybody down, Shavasana. We're not doing the other side. Yes?
I noticed the picture, your picture on the wall sort of near the restrooms of the punishment for breaking, I don't know, social norms or something, and where the highest ranking people got the worst punishment.
That's right.
Which is kind of the opposite of the way things go here.
So the Inca, they only had very few laws, and the laws were, you don't kill unless it's state sanctioned. I mean, it's an empire after all. If you're in the army, you're definitely allowed to kill. You're not allowed to steal. And the third rule, you're not allowed to be lazy. Laziness punishable by death, actually. Because when, I see a couple claps. Wow, okay. I'm in the right room. No. So here's why laziness is punishable by death. Because if you are completely dependent on one another for your food, for your water, for your clothing, in a altitude that will sunburn you in the daytime and freeze you to death at night, everybody has to drag their weight. Everybody has to carry their weight. And if somebody gets sick, everybody else has to do twice as much work to make that up. So if you're not doing that, you're not part of the community. And we can't just let you walk off. We need to make an example. And so the painting that you're speaking of is the hanged man, it's upside down. So historically, they weren't hung upside down. They were just. How many people here saw Emperor's New Groove, the Disney movie? All right, it's kind of a deep cut. It's not one of their famous ones. But you know the part where they get strapped to a log and then thrown off the cliff? Historically accurate. So they would tie you to a pole. It was not a tree trunk, but whatever pole they had, and then read you what you did wrong and toss you off the cliff. Or they would hang you by your hair over a river with your hands and feet bound, and when your hair finally ripped out, then I guess that's the end of your punishment and suffering. They did not mess around with punishments, but as you mentioned, thank you for reading, I did write those all myself, the higher position you are, the stronger the punishment. And so if you're a government official, if you work for their church, for the temples, you're going to have a higher punishment than like the teenager who's like cutting corners in the fields, right? So like not everyth's not punished by death immediately, right? But it did help with accountability.
We should adopt that.
Who's to say? I'm not the politician. questions?
So I talked to you about tarot, and I have my reader, and she uses Mother Peace. So I want to know, what came first to you? Do you follow the tarot? Did you, what?
So I've been pulling tarot cards with like my girlfriends at sleepovers since I was like probably like 12 or 13. And that was like way before I knew like about, I mean, I'd spent years, like aggregate, like years in Peru for sure. But like with my family, not like talking about Indian, Mama Kia. So I'd read a bunch of books on tarot, I'd gotten readings done, I'd done readings, all of that. And I like love Jungian archetypes and anything that has to do with like that field of psychology and like dream interpretation. And so after the coloring book went so well, I was like, I should design a tarot deck. And people had been telling me since high school, like, do a tarot deck, do a tarot. I'm like, yeah, 78 paintings, sure. Who has the time for that? But after the coloring book, I was like, I need a bigger project. And so that felt like so I fit it in. So
Your husband told me you're halfway, because I would love to buy a deck. He said you're halfway through.
Yeah, a little bit more. I'm at 44.
Okay.
I have 44 cards done, and there's 78 in a deck, so.
Almost there.
We're getting there. We're getting there. Yeah, nothing's for sale today.
What happened to the Inca population in terms of over time?
Yeah, good question.
To today?
So, the end of the Inca Empire, brutal. In the final years of the Inca Empire, smallpox had traveled from North and Central America into South America, even with no Europeans having entered. It traveled down through trade routes, and it took out a third of the population. Third. If you're the guy in charge, supposedly speaking to God, and a third of the people you know just died, there's going to be some internal struggle. And so the edges of the empire started to crumble because they were like, we should just guide ourselves. This guy doesn't know what he's talking about. And so the centralized power started to fall apart. More importantly, the Sapa Inca, the guy in charge, his brother was like, I should go at Awadla. And there's a painting of him on the wall. And so when the Spaniards had come down, Francisco Pizarro with like, I don't know, 16 dudes or something, like he met with the Inca's brother to devise a plan to overthrow him, to overthrow the guy in charge. And so between disease, the edges of the empire crumbling already, and the Spaniards had horses, which is like, the horses and like metal suits of armor, right? Like that's like, no, there's no steel, right? That combination basically, it's a very Game of Thrones, like Red Wedding kind of chapter in South America, where there's just infighting, and yeah, basically the Spanish put in a puppet king, so that would be an easier transition, and then like hundreds of missionaries came over and outlawed all the things I paint about and instilled Catholicism. That's the end of the Inca Empire. Though I will say, I'll say this, bright note, the last revolution of revolt of the indigenous trying to get the Cusco back was headed by a guy also named Tupac. And when the Spanish caught him, they beheaded him and buried his head in the ground and left his body out for everyone to see as a message. However, to this day, legend says his body is being regrown by Pachamama, the earth goddess. And when he's fully reconfigured, he will crawl out of the ground and lead the armies of the indigenous people to freedom. So, I don't know, that's a bright note. When you look at history, that's a bright note. Do you have a question?
I just want to ask what's the staple food, or what was the staple food?
Yeah. So food, when you're growing food on a mountain range, altitude is important. So the Inca the Andean people, they created what's called tier farming. So if the mountain's like this, they leveled it out and then made a step, and then leveled it out and made a step, leveled it out, made a step, so that the crops could grow parallel to the ground. If you watch the History Channel in the 90s like I did, they will tell you that those are steps for giants to walk up. I don't know what drugs you have to take to believe that. It's how you do farming in these areas. They irrigate it by starting irrigation channels at the top of the mountain where there's ice. And then when that ice would melt, it would come down and water. And not just water all the plants, but provide fresh water for people so that they wouldn't get sick from like dysentery and all the other standing water. The important crops were corn, that was a little bit lower on the mountain if you can imagine. And then as you work your way up, you've got quinoa. And then at the very, like almost the very top, when you get closer to the top, like the edge of like where you can grow stuff, potatoes. Potatoes come from Peru and Bolivia, the Andes in general. And before they went to Ireland, you're welcome. And, well, I know the end of that, so sorry. So potatoes can grow at a very high elevation where the UV light would usually burn through other plants' leaves. And because they grow underground, the fruit doesn't spoil. But more importantly, all of these crops, they were brought to the very, very mountaintops to become freeze-dried because parts of the Andes Mountains are very dry and very cold. That's also how they mummified a lot of folks. So you go up there, everything freeze-dries, you bring it down, and it was put into granaries by the government. A third goes to the government for the armies. A third goes to the church. We'll call it the church, but we're talking Indian Mamakia here. They saved it in case there was a famine. And the third stays for you and your family unit called your Ayu. So like your cousins, your brother, your sister-in-law. And so so there's no money. And so there's no money. And everything was just like split up in thirds. And yeah, so those were like the main crops, but also llama and alpaca. Guinea pig, it's called cuy. So everybody had cuy in their homes because they would eat the scraps off the floor to keep other rodents out, but then also you can eat them when things get rough. I'm not kidding. All right, we're past time, and you guys may have like other plans. So thank you so much for coming. I know we're like supposed to dance and stuff, but I don't know how like fire safety hazardy that's gonna be. So I'm just gonna put up like a video of traditional Peruvian dance. If you want to follow along, please help yourselves. And then if there's more food, I don't know if there is. Oh, there's cake. There's tres leches cake. My sister-in-law made it. Tres leches cake is like one of my favorite things.
Wonderful. Could you just address one thing? What did they do for medicines?
Yeah. So actually, the Inca had a very advanced. They were doing brain surgery, successful brain surgery, for hundreds of years. So they had actually really great medicinal practices, herbalism. Astrology was actually really big, not the kind of astrology you're thinking of, because they have different stars, obviously, in the southern hemisphere. Yes.